What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 369. My name's Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts, and then, as always, I'm joined by
Ron.
And John as well.
And John as well, also, too.
Yeah.
He is there as well, too, also at the same time.
Yes.
And
me three.
How are you guys doing tonight?
Good.
You both look great. Let me just say that real quick at the top.
It's good to see you guys, man.
You got a nice swoop to the hair, Steve. You're growing it out a little bit.
It needs a trim. It needs a trim, but
it's looking good. I'm
doing what I can with it.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Thanks. My barber's retired, so I got to find a new one. You know what I mean? So.
Oh wow.
Well, she's like a stay-at-home mom now, so
she's like, I'm out the game. I'm out the haircut game.
Hung up her shears.
Yeah. Did they like start pulling a? It's like a big, like a gold, trimmer.
Oh, you mean like hoist something like?
Yeah, hoist up the gold trimmer. Yeah.
All right.
Pulling it. I don't
just
know
want
why
the
it's that
listeners
big.
to know that you were doing sort of a mime of like a pulley system, pulling something up.
Yeah, pulley system.
Yeah, pulley system.
Sure. Pulley system.
It feels like a longer break. We only took 1 week off, but it feels like
look, we cross state lines, and I think that's why it's kind of been crazy. Like, Steve, you cross state lines. John and I cross state lines to see a movie.
That's true.
It's it's crazy. It's crazy. So
So I guess looking ahead, we got this week's required viewing pick that John chose last episode, which is, what is it? Garth Marenghi's Darkplace. Is that the proper name?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then, like Ronald just mentioned, in our time off, John and he actually took a trip down to Virginia to see an advanced screening of Scream 6. So they're going to talk a little bit about that, spoiler free. So you can listen along, because I will as well, and I'm trying to avoid all spoilers.
Spoiler free. We're gonna.
I'm avoiding everything myself. Yeah. It's one of my favorites, so I want to go in cold as possible. So we've all agreed, no spoilers. So listen along. Don't worry about it. You'll be safe. And then we'll just round it out with anything else that we've seen before we get to the required viewing. Ronald, you wanted to mention a piece of news that came out, I guess, yesterday. You wanted to mention real quick on the pod. So take it away.
I am in the minority. I love to pay for my art. And on the 28th of March, some art's coming that I've been waiting for. Avatar 2 is coming to video on demand. So that's Prime Video, Apple TV, Vudu, Movies Anywhere. Right. Avatar Way of the Water is coming to video on demand in 4K Ultra HD. So that's super exciting. And what's even more interesting about it is that sometimes when you get video on demand stuff, you kind of get a bare bones copy. This is not that. 3 hours of content will be accompanying this video on demand thing. So it'll almost be like, it's kind of a special thing to have something like, I'd say the two services that offer it, Apple TV and Movies Anywhere is up there too. Services that actually include the extras, but it looks like almost every service will have the extra 3 hours of making ofs and behind the scenes and extra scenes and things like that. So this is exciting. You're not getting a bare bones thing. So I'm guessing this thing is probably going to cost $25-$30. It's it's just, that seems to be the standard. 80 for Brady just came out this week, and it is $25. So, it's a cost to be the boss and get something in the best possible quality that you can have it at home. If you wait it out, you could probably get it for cheaper, but if you want it within the first couple of months, you're probably going to pay a little over $20 for it. So,
right.
How you guys feeling about it coming home? How you feeling about it?
I mean, I'll be just interested to hear some opinions from you guys on this movie that I had opinions on so long ago that I almost forget that we haven't really talked about it on the show. So no, I'm interested in what you think, but also, I think that it's interesting. I think this has happened with a few premium releases that they've gone out of their way to make some version of like bonus features. for a digital release. So I think that's cool, but that feels very James Cameron to say we're not going to let this move.
For sure.
This is going to feel like a momentous event as a digital release. But what about you, Steve?
Yeah, same as Ronald. I'm just excited to finally see it. I'm been unable to go see it in theaters. I haven't really seen much in theaters at all, except for the advanced screening that I went to with you guys for Ant-Man. But yeah, I don't know. It's one of the ones that's been on my list to watch. I really wanted to try to watch it before the Oscars. I'm not sure where it's a real contender there. Maybe some technical categories, but being nominated for Best Picture is an achievement, and I was really hoping to watch it. But I'm glad that it'll be here in a couple weeks, and I'll be able to watch it, digitally. It is interesting. I wanted to mention that it is one of these things where it seems like in some ways, and this is something we've talked about a lot on the podcast, like this new idea of the channels that the movies go through, from theatrical to streaming or to video on demand, or where they're kind of flowing from studio to studio. And this being a 20th Century Films release, but under Disney, there was a lot of speculation prior to that date coming out of whether or not it would go to VOD and streaming at the same time, like to the Disney Plus platform,
Right.
or if there'd be like a tiered release, which is actually what obviously has ended up happening. So it's interesting to see the way they're kind of, I guess, trying different things for like bigger blockbusters. Obviously, there's ways to exploit those channels more, when something can sit on a digital rental or a digital purchase for a bit, before you put it on the streamer, where all the people that are paying their monthly thing are definitely waiting for that movie, because that's one of the big ones that they've released. That and the Marvel stuff are the big things. But it definitely seems like it's another example of a filmmaker and a property just kind of flexing and getting the windows or some variety or variation of the windows that they used to get. And this being, now the number 3 highest grossing film of all time, and, having this long run in theaters. Now it's going to have a window for digital only. And then, eventually it will be on Disney Plus probably in the next couple of months. So it's a very interesting kind of example of how just milking it, but just how out of control the release, what it looks like. Because in the same token, like, there's this, and then there's like, there's movies that are talking about like how well Cocaine Bear has done, and it's a part of Universal's release pattern. So Universal has the 17-day window, meaning that we'll probably be able to watch it next week digitally. It hasn't been said yet, but it seems like that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then there's talks about that going to Peacock day and date. It's just like there's all these weird things where like Cocaine Bear is a hit. It's a very successful movie already, and it's just the difference of it'll be on digital in 17 days ish, and possibly even on a streaming service in that same time frame. And here Avatar is different scales obviously, but it's so all over the place still. There's no real expectation or like norm where people can train to like what to do to watch what you want to watch. It's just it's kind of like a question.
You just got to stay agile. You got to stay agile. Get ready. You know what's interesting? Peacock releasing an unrated version of Megan that isn't. You can't get it anyplace else. Like if they incentivize things like that, like somebody may want to get Peacock. They may want to consider getting it for a month or two.
Yeah.
So it's exciting.
But yeah, I'm excited to finally see Avatar. That's for sure.
Cool. So, John, are we talking about your incredible pick?
I had not watched this in so long that it was like a lot of jokes that I think there's like 2 or 3 of them that I've watched more than others of this 6-episode run that we're talking about today of Garth Marenghi's Darkplace. And so watching all 6 of them again, it was fun seeing the jokes that I had sort of forgotten and the episodes I had sort of forgotten, alongside the first one in particular that I've showed to so many people over the years that has almost become like a short film that I've used to kind of just say to somebody, look at this thing. Cool. But it's that British comedy thing. We talked about this when I picked it, of just it's like such a specific concept, and it's so fully realized to its potential, and it only exists for these these 6 episodes,
Yeah.
and it just, like, I mean, for what it's trying to do, I mean, you can't really say it doesn't knock the ball out of the park, because there's really nothing else quite like it. But I love all the little details it gets right. And if folks don't know, it's a show that it pretends to be hosted by this kind of pompous horror author,
Yeah,
who
for
fancies
sure.
himself a bit of a celebrity, and
Yeah.
and this is a show in the 80s that he produced and wrote and directed and starred in, that kind of is alongside his fiction. And what we're seeing is a modern, as of 2004, when this show came out, we're seeing a modern, like, he's pulling out of the vaults these episodes of this show that it sounds like never aired at all. Like, he's a little dodgy on it. I think he said it aired in Peru briefly. But it's like, it's totally a show that he produced 6 episodes of and then got put in his vault. And of course, he's a fictional character played by the comedian and actor Matthew Holness. And he has a real specific energy, and I definitely want to talk about what that energy is as we get into this. But and then what you're seeing is an episode of his show from the 80s, but he's spliced it in with, again, he's claiming like modern interview footage. And I love that each time there's a slightly different explanation of the interview footage. And one time he said that someone's included because they were there at the time of the creation and they haven't died or offended him. But it's like he's doing a little bit of meta commentary on sort of documentary or reality, or almost like DVD commentaries. It's almost like that's what it seems to be riffing on, is the sort of pompous self-reflection of artists of every type in this modern era, or at least at the time 2004 was probably part of that peak era of commentary tracks, and physical media was still the thing back then. So I mean, it parodies so many things and it's got so many layers to it. Like, it's almost got like a 3-layer intro. Every episode starts with him at his desk reading a snatch of his really terrible prose, and then he gets up and does the same series of shots through his house as he gives a little introduction to the episode. Then you get the introduction to the episode, which has sort of a combination Twilight Zone into a parody of an 80s television show opening. Then you get the episode, which then has its own little title card that comes up. So there's like many layers to the onion of parody in this thing. And I don't know, I think it's so sophisticated, and yet some of the jokes are such silly slapstick humor. It's just an interesting thing. It's totally British in that way, that it matches the like brainy with the low just perfectly. What did you think, Steve? This was your first time watching it, right?
Yeah, I'd never even honestly heard of it. But yeah, this is the first time watching it. I mean, and honestly, I don't know that it fully I don't know that I fully was enjoying it from beginning to end, but I mean, I definitely found myself laughing quite a bit. I almost felt like maybe what wore on me pretty quickly was just like, I don't know, like I was having trouble placing it. Like, I found it to be pretty funny, but I almost feel like the like how overtly like bad it was, how overtly bad it was, like almost seemed like it was like too on the nose, or like it was too obviously intending to be so bad. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like,
well, they don't miss a beat. They don't miss a beat as far as how to make it bad. But I think that falls under like super low budget, self-produced thing, you know. But I agree with you that like there's no missing it. There's nothing subtle about the way that it like it is a piece of bad art. But I think the fact that they don't miss any opportunity with like eye lines that don't line up and characters that can't remember
like,
lines,
cuts that don't like, wearing different like the clothes is being like worn differently from one cut to the next, like, I mean, that stuff is, I think I found it a lot funnier in the first couple episodes, but I think by the third or fourth one I was like, this is, I don't know, this is like totally my thing. That said, again, I did laugh a lot, and I do love Matt Berry, and I just feel like every moment that he's there, and even like Richard Ayoade, like I love him as well. Maybe I'm just more aware of those the two of them from other stuff that I've seen, but I mean, those were the two that really stood out to me. I don't know, the absurdity of it was really fun too, but I don't know, it was something that I thought maybe I was gonna like more from like just maybe what you guys had talked about, and I feel like a couple other people had mentioned it over time, but I had just completely forgotten about it, mainly because of Matt Berry. But I don't know. It was fun to watch, but thankfully, it's like, short episodes. It's not like some huge commitment, but just it wasn't exactly what I was thinking it was going to be.
And do you think having to watch all 6 episodes in a spell as opposed to like watching it over time? Do you think that maybe made it wear more on you, or do you
Yes.
see? Because I do think there is something about. I mean, I love it, and even I think marathoning it is like it's a little bit samey, and that's not to me like a
Yes.
knock against the quality of it, but it's like it's hard to get the same if you're watching all 6 of these in a run. Then it's like it's hard to get the same interest level going into the 4th or the 5th as you had watching the 1st or the 2nd. But I think that some of the jokes are so funny that like they do make you kind of wake up and go, oh yeah, this isn't just the same thing over and over again. They are doing something. This is evolving a little bit as it goes along.
Right.
But it is sort of like my thing about showing the first episode to people. You kind of get it after the first episode, and that, you know, again, that can be taken as a knock against many shows if you're going to see it that way. But it's also, to me, it's like, does this establish a formula that you could have some permutations of? And I think 6 episodes is about right, as far as sticking to that formula. Well, Ronald, you had expressed that you love this when I brought it up before, so talk a little bit about maybe the things, like how did it cross your path the first time, and what did you feel watching it again?
Matt Berry, the IT Crowd I was a huge fan of that show, and I just kind of fell down a rabbit hole with like seeing that he was a musician. And this is one of the shows that I saw, and it was, you know, kind of hit me hard, like maybe because I watch a ton of I'll give you an example. I did a movie stream of B-side Marvel movies the other day. So I had Doctor Strange from 1978 and Spider-Man, the Japanese one, and the tone of that stuff is so similar to this. The seriousness that people have for these performances is just, you wanna take it seriously, but like it's so rooted in silliness that, you know, delivering a line like blood, you're just saying blood all over and over and over again. It's just, you know, and the musical numbers that came in the middle of the show, like it's so random. It's let me tell you why this is interesting to me, because I just started watching History of the World and I didn't laugh once. And then I watched this and I laughed a ton, and I was like, what is it about the difference between the humor that didn't hit me at all for History of the World, because I love his stuff, and this, and I
well, plus
I
everyone
think
in the world that we love today in comedy practically is in History of the World.
Yes, right. And I didn't laugh
it's like
once.
but it's like I kind of thought I wouldn't. I saw the trailers and I thought that looks fun, and then I saw so much about it, and I've watched interviews with people talking about it, and I've enjoyed. I listened to Nick Kroll and Ike Barinholtz promoting it, and I liked that. But I realized it still doesn't make me want to watch like a warmed over Mel Brooks thing.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not the promise. Like Nikki has even said, should we watch that? That looks funny. Should we watch that? And each time I've been like, I don't know. Like, I'm just not expecting anything from it. So I've been kind of waiting to see if people thought it was really funny.
I feel so bad, like leveraging that, but I'm just saying.
No, I know what you're saying though. It's a good comparison. It's a good comparison because this is absurd and silly like that.
Yeah. So, but I also get what Steve is talking about. Like, there's a thing, like I'm a yes and person about stuff, right? There's like a thing that my friends have that's like if I don't get this shit in 20 minutes, fuck you for showing me this. Not Steve, but I'm saying like my friend, like other friends have it. Like, and Steve is one of the more liberal. You know, he'll give it a chance. And my other friends are like, this is trash. You're a piece of shit. How could you do this to me?
How could you make me watch
ruined my life? Yeah, it's just like and so I do say to you, Steve, thank you for even trying. Because I've shown this to people and I've gotten my feelings hurt because of how poorly people reacted to it. So the fact that you're just like, this wasn't for me, is better than.
Well, it's so fully doing what it's doing. You know, it's so fully like
it commits to it.
That right, and that's either going to be the thing that makes you totally click into it, or it's going to be a thing that kind of to what you're saying. I guess a combination of what you're saying and what Steve was saying would be like, if you're not fully clicking into it, then it's not going to be the thing that you need to see 6 episodes of necessarily. But if you do fully click into it, it's like each episode does have like 20 new little nuanced things that are slightly different than other versions of the same thing. Matt Berry's performance is notable for how like exquisitely awkward it is the entire time. Every line reading is like the wrong syllable, and just even playing to the camera in a funny way. And I think that what's her name who plays I think the actress's name is, I'm gonna get it right, Alice Lowe, who plays Madeline Wool, who's the actress that plays Dr. Liz Asher. I mean, this is like the layers upon layers. You have the actors who play the actors who play the characters. She's perfect for that sort of British. If you've seen that kind of British 70s, 80s thing, she is pitch perfect. Like every little line reading of hers is so like just the sound of her voice, everything of that type of like spunky heroine that would have popped up in those days and would have been, in a very misogynist time, would have been presented like a spunky heroine, but still would have had the sort of, maybe not quite the sexism that her character experiences on the show, but that's just a few degrees removed from what was actually going on in the time of entertainment as far as the way women were depicted.
She was working there for hair and makeup, which was,
well, no, it's what he said. It's like he said
he said, but I'm just saying, like
for makeup and clothes,
makeup and clothes. Like
when Matt Berry meets her and is like, "You're a woman," he just says it. But no, I think that like the parody of it, and to me, it's got the silliness, and I also like the layer of each episode does have a slightly worked out horror story. I mean, even though it's totally wonky, it's like there is a real story going on there. And I love the way they wedge in certain things that just always happen, such as Dean Lerner firing a shotgun, like just kind of randomly, not really, especially in the first episode, he's not really shooting at the right angle or in the right direction. That's to Steve's point of just how impossibly bad is this thing. But I do think that like the awkward assemblage of the footage sometimes is just like so artfully, it's just madness. It's like if you've seen a cheaply made movie that someone's showed you, sometimes it's that kind of thing. People work with what they've got, and there's a lot of like, just pretend we got that on film and that you saw that, because this what we did capture doesn't really convey any kind of reality. I also liked seeing the cameos from people like Stephen Merchant and Julian Barrett, and people that pop up that you might know from other things. It does seem like in that sense it's a little snapshot of maybe this group of comedians that were working together. And you mentioned Richard Ayoade, Steve. Some of his moments are just hilarious. I mean, he's got like a way of delivering a line that is just like got this lyrical kind of sing-songy quality to it, but it's just perfect. But let's talk about Garth Marenghi before we move on completely. Like, what do you say about the energy of that guy? I feel like the fact that he's like a sort of seems like he's got like a Napoleon complex, like he's a little guy and he's wearing the leather jacket and like smoking, looking off into the distance, and knowing that this was created as a vanity project. I really think that I know that guy. I've met that guy in so many fields of creative endeavor that I've been involved in. I've met these guys who are sort of like, they have their own kind of energy. It's not quite Tommy Wiseau, but they have this quality of pushing projects forward and getting things done. And it's like, it's pure ego that drives what they do. And I just think I don't know. I think he nails that as the character and as the guy we see in the wraparounds.
Yeah. So that person could be Garth Marenghi, or it can also be Quentin Tarantino. So that's
yes.
You know what I mean? Like it's like that path could be the worst thing ever or the best thing ever. And those obsessions, those pockets of obsession and ego and all that stuff, you feel it. You've seen a million versions of these, especially when you're in creative spaces. So
well, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah. What were you about to say, Ronald?
No, that was it.
Oh, I just wanted to mention a couple of the things that we were talking about. Like, I love the awkward zoom ins on the model, on the miniature of the hospital, that where the camera always has to kind of find where it's going just a little bit. I thought that was a really funny touch. I love the funny use of slow motion. And then they explain in one episode that they often were running up to 8 minutes short. And so they used, anytime there wasn't dialogue, they used slow motion to try to pad the show out. And after that, it really does become so much more pronounced that like there'll be entire moments that are just like running down the hallway or whatever. And I just there's one little quote that I thought was really funny that kind of sums up the tone of the character when he's talking about the episode and he's hyping it. I believe it's the one about the Scottish ghosts or whatever those are. And he says, and here it is, uncut, uncensored, unbelievable, and unpalatable.
Yeah,
But I thought that kind of sums up the show in a certain sort of way. Like it is definitely like this one man's vision. And I guess maybe that's why I believe it, as far as silly as it gets. I believe it as the production of this totally egotistical mind. Because I mean, we've seen these self-made movies by these people who fashion themselves as like the cool guy. We've seen that in a few cases, and it usually is like outsider art. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a little bit naive, to your point, Steve, of like, how could it be this bad without being deliberately bad? It's like, it is possible. Right. People make some pretty wretched things in the name of like their vision. But yeah, I think people, it's either totally up your alley or maybe you'll be a little lukewarm on it. But I really enjoyed watching it. And Nikki came through and saw me watching a little bit of it. And I think the Matt Berry factor pulled her in. So I bet modern viewers will find that to be one of the more interesting things about it, just because he's kind of having a moment due to Laszlo.
So good.
All right, so whose turn is it now? Who picks our next required viewing?
Is it me?
I think it's me.
It's you?
I think isn't it?
What was the last thing you did?
The last thing we did was The Dry, actually, wasn't it? So that was Steve.
Oh,
that's Ronald then. Okay, that's right.
Oh, okay. So right. This is not from the past. This is from this year, and it's because I've been wanting to see it for so long. For some reason, it just shadow dropped today on VOD. Operation Fortune Rouge de Guerre. The Guy Ritchie.
Is that a Guy Ritchie? Yeah.
Yeah, the new Operation Fortune.
Sweet.
Movie.
I've been waiting for this. This is exciting.
Fuck, right? Like I've been waiting.
There was like no marketing, nothing for this movie. It came out in theaters like 2 weeks ago.
Yes, and then they just dropped it today. PVOD.
Yeah, so weird.
So it's on the major services. Prime Video, Vudu, Movies Anywhere, Apple TV, and the rental I think is like $6 or $7. I've been wanting to see this movie so bad. So yeah, that's my pick. Operation Fortune is what they shortened it to for America.
I was thinking about when this required viewing thing could be used just to get us all on the same page with our listeners and us to say, this is what we're doing next time. And it's not necessarily the obvious big pick, even though I think this is a movie we may have talked about anyway, if we had all seen it. But no, I'm glad you picked this one. I was very curious about it. And I think the cast looks great. So,
oh yeah, man, I'm so excited.
So you said this is on VOD now?
Yeah.
Wow. I don't see it on iTunes.
You don't see it? I saw it
March 3rd.
Where do you guys stand on Guy Ritchie in general, like in his sort of late period phase that he's in these last few movies?
I'm a fan, man. Like I feel like most of them I've at least enjoyed.
I don't know why I think of like M. Night Shyamalan as having, like, it's not quite the same, but it's a similar thing of like a director who's been around long enough to become a cartoon of themselves and to have a name that went from being the cool name to being the name that people kind of scoff at to the guy who's still doing it, to like, oh, now every couple of years he puts out a movie and they're kind of able to, like, he's scaled it to something he can do pretty reliably every time he makes a movie. He's not.
Is it only on Vudu? Let me check, because sometimes Vudu releases stuff early.
Yeah, I feel like he's also like hit that moment where like he went from making the kinds of movies that you call Guy Ritchie movies to kind of like he kind of crescendoed into like the King Arthur movie that was like that massive bomb.
Yeah.
And then it was like which is very similar to what you're saying, like the M. Night kind of path where he then pulled back and made a string of like the lower budget Guy Ritchie action, thriller,
like the scrappy version of what he did as he was getting bigger.
Yeah, no, it's totally accurate. And I mean, like like Wrath of Man and The Gentleman, like these last few I thought were really, I was really entertained by most of them. So yeah, I'm excited for this one.
What they also might have in common in that sense is that what makes us like them is that they know how to make a movie. They know how to put together an image. They know how to put together a sequence, Right. So like, if you liked Guy Ritchie movies to begin with, he's still able to do that stuff. It's just maybe a little bit more mature. I don't know. I have not really stood back and looked at his career ever. That might be an interesting.
Well, yeah. And he even like did Aladdin. Like he did Aladdin.
Right.
Like which
is
was
a total outlier.
a monster hit. You know, I think that was like $1 billion movie.
That no one
but
talks about.
And he always has like a lot of really great. The casts are always great too. You know, like even this one. You know, I don't know. You got who's in this? Hugh Grant, Josh Hartnett, Aubrey Plaza, obviously Statham, Carrie Elways, Eddie Marsan, I think is in this one. I don't know. He's always got like a great cast, so I'm always at least intrigued by the people that are like down to play in that little scrappy action movie that he makes. I think makes pretty well. So, but no, I didn't even realize this one was out. But I've been waiting for this.
Maybe it's not, and I just spoke out of my ass because I thought it came out. But that's still my pick.
Well, how are we gonna watch it if it's not out? Gotta go to the theater to see it.
Oh, we're gonna watch it.
Okay.
Is it in theaters this weekend or something?
It came out in theaters like the 3rd, I think.
Okay. Well, I've got
last week. Yeah. So we'll figure it out, but we'll see it. We'll see it.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see it for sure.
All right, cool. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
Well, here's a movie we saw that Steve didn't get
tell
to
me.
see. You're going to witness how artfully we can avoid. I think this is a fun game, Ronald, to talk about this movie.
It's very important. No spoilers.
Without really hitting any
Don't hit it.
So I would say comments on the structure of the movie and like acts. If you liked one act but not another, those things are probably okay, but not actually what happens in those acts. That would be mine.
Sure.
So Ronald, start us off.
Hold on. And I also expect a ranking of the franchise from both of you.
I was going to say, that's where I'm kind of confused because I would have said I was one of the people who didn't like the last Scream as much as people liked it. You know, Scream 5.
Yeah. I'm on the same boat.
Like I didn't rank it above 3 and 4 so readily. I still think that it gets a little messy with 3 and 4 and 5. But I think that 5 was somehow my least favorite. But it's still, as we've said, part of a very consistent series of movies. So I think it's a little bit hard to not like tip your hat to Scream in that sense. That like there's a quality level. Yeah. There's something they bring to these movies that like through the 6th one, I still have not had that feeling that they backed off or they've had to backslide in terms of the production value or anything like that. Like these movies are big, well made, and you calling them slashers, call them whodunits, whatever you want to call it. But I think this new wave, the 5th and 6th one, they definitely like the 6th one is definitely a follow-up to the last movie. And so I feel like people who love that movie may just go apeshit for this movie. But if you didn't like the last movie, I think it's going to be, or not didn't like, but just didn't love. I think this one would have some of the same issues I would say that the last movie had for me. And I can talk about what those are in very general terms, but Ronald, you seem to be, somewhat agreeing. How do you feel it sits in with the whole series?
The Creed. I'm comparing this to Creed 3 for a very important reason.
All right,
Creed 3 and this movie are absent their anchor, or what people would perceive to be the anchor. Right?
That's a good take.
Yeah,
I like that.
Sidney Prescott is kind of the center of this story in some way, shape, or form, either in reference, at presence or physically being there. And this lack of Sidney Prescott gives this movie a freedom that we have never had before. We have never had this much freedom in the mythos of this character than we did this one. And that's what separates it. In fact, so much so that I'm gonna throw something. I'm gonna throw my dick on the table and say something crazy.
Ronald, this is a video podcast. I just want you to.
Okay. Sorry.
We'll just mark
keep that close shot above your chest. All right.
You're gonna hear the sound of it. Here, hit the table.
Got it.
You didn't mention that it was hard.
Yeah, that's a level of creepiness.
Yes, that's worse.
I'm so sorry.
That's worse, man.
This has one of the best beginnings since the first one.
Yes.
It is incredibly creative. I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like it in this world. And it really does something different. Like it is saying, like, it's like, oh, you miss Sydney? Well, we're offering something a little different It's like so from Grand Theft Auto 2 to Grand Theft Auto 3, there's a big difference. This was a Grand Theft Auto was flat. It wasn't very open. Grand Theft Auto 3 opened the world up. You can ride a car all around the place. And that's what this movie does. The world is open. The mythos of this character is open. And because of that, it does something really cool. Like, I had to think about it because it really does contradict everything you know about the series. That's what it is. It does. It challenges everything you know, Steve. Everything you like gets challenged a little bit.
Okay.
But it modernizes it in a cool way. It opens it up in a cool way. And I think that the addition of the story being what John said, a direct continuation. Even if you didn't like the previous one, it really does create something really cool from those set of characters. So that's how I feel. That's my initial feeling. Mm-hmm. And I didn't feel like that at first. It took me a while because I'm like, this is not my Scream. And I'm not even like beholden to it. Like, you know, Steve, you're a big Scream fan.
Yeah.
But I like Scream. I do like the first two Screams. To me are close to like perfection to me.
Great. Yeah.
And so I'm like, I want something that challenges me, but this challenged the shit out of me. And it really did. It stuck the landing. And I think that's what I was surprised at. So, John, would you think after me?
I mean, honestly, you took the words right out of my mouth about that opening. I would say like the first 15 minutes of this movie are a ride.
Whoa.
A ride. And like, go from the familiar, from like a cool version of the familiar that you might think you know what's happening, and then you kind of pat yourself on the back for going, yeah, I kind of knew this was maybe going to happen, or this was where this was going to go, and then switcheroo, and then a switcheroo, and there's a couple of major things that just, when you talk about the freedom, I mean, didn't even think about that, about like an open video game, open world game, where it's like you can actually wander around now. There was a moment in this that I felt so unmoored from what this movie might be that honestly, I feel like I know what you said, Ronald. I do think this movie does a good job of the sort of sequel, getting the characters back together, sort of feeling of where is everybody now. And you know, within the next 15 or 20 minutes, you kind of catch up with the characters. So I think it does do a good job of that. But I actually as it got deeper into the group, that's the survivors from the last movie, I started to lose interest. This movie got real bogged down for me in the middle. Had some fun moments, some fun sequences, but by the time it got to the final act, I felt like this movie was way too in love with the quote unquote mythology of this series that to me feels sort of like it should be somewhat free of mythology. But I also recognized that by the time you were going from Scream 2 to Scream 3, there was all this stuff with Cotton and Sydney and the past. So that it had its own sort of form of mythology that it was leaning on. But I just feel like these movies make that a little bit more like it's almost, it's not like it confused me, but it still felt like it was needlessly complex. And I don't know, like, without saying any more about what's going on, we'll talk about it once Steve has seen the movie as far as the resolution. But like that last act to me, like it just kind of annoyed me with how much of an explanation we got, when you have a really complicated answer to the who done it, you have to spend a lot of time explaining it. And so there's a lot of that. And I think that as much as this movie did some bold things, you might look at Scream 5 as a movie that shows, oh yeah, they are willing to look at some of these iconic elements in the series and make those characters just as vulnerable as new characters, you know. But this movie, I feel like, really pulled its punches and played it safe in a lot of ways that I didn't expect it to. In addition to doing the kind of, as you're saying, Ronald, there is a kind of brutal quality to this movie. But I feel like I once you've seen it, Steve, there's a question I have that I can't ask right now, that kind of sums up my feelings if I go any deeper into that topic. It gets into like a central question of, is this movie doing something on purpose that I find to be a drawback, but is it a feature, not a bug of this movie? You know, I don't like when movies are meta and they can use that as a get out of jail free card for any problem. It's like, well, that's not a lame twist, that's a commentary on a lame twist. I don't like that. I also think it was always a thin concept to me. I loved the character of Randy in the first 2 Scream movies, and I loved the way that he represented the horror nerd who knows the rules. But I always question those rules. Just as a fan of horror, I always really questioned the rules a little bit. Like, are those rules really? They just don't really apply to that many movies, and it's fun to say those are the rules, but the more specific you get and the deeper into the franchise we get, there's this really wedged in scene where characters are talking about, this is the new part of a franchise. Well, this is a reboot franchise, so these are the rules of the reboot. That kind of shit just doesn't work. It just doesn't feel integrated into the movie. You don't have Randy. I'm sorry, this new Randy they're trying to give us is not Randy. And I found that to be
got more specific. This got way more specific.
Too specific. But do you ever watch that? Like, a friend of mine used to say that it was annoying on X-Files when Fox Mulder would like see what was going on and he would instantly go, "Oh, this is the Wendigo, a creature from indigenous peoples' lore." You know, like he would just know the answer. He would just look at something and know. I don't like when people like. I've been watching the Final Destination movies recently, and they do a similar thing in that of like at some point everybody just knows the quote unquote rules. It's like, well, in order to do this, we've got to reverse death by tricking death in this way, and it's like, when did we all agree that we knew what the rules were? Like, that's why I like It Follows. People criticize the kids being stupid in that movie, but like, I love that the kids are like trying stupid things that don't really work and that nobody really figures out quite what the rules of this thing are. So I kind of feel like when you act like it has rules and that's a way to predict the behavior of the killer, that to me, that part just really loses me just dramatically, because I'm just not buying into that notion that like, well, we all know this is what's going to happen now because of this. And when the killer reveals themselves and says, well, we know this is a reboot, so I had to do this. And it's just like that stuff. It doesn't work for me the way that Randy did. The simple idea, let's have a horror nerd who realizes he's in a slasher movie, you know, versus now that's these characters that are aware like of that level of depth. But I'm not saying it's not a well-written scene or a funny scene. It just feels wedged in. And you know what I mean, Ronald? It really is only that one scene where you get that stuff.
It's just,
it feels obligatory.
sometimes the fact that, like Simpsons, it's the last man standing, it can become so self-referential that it becomes like cringy. But the fact that we're saying that this is the only thing that this happened in is a credit, because a lot of Gen Z-ish stuff is like that, like very self-referential and shitting on the past and also making fun of the present and not seeming like it cares either way. Like, this doesn't do that. It really does pay homage to the past while also introducing us, like, to the point. This is how crazy it is, Steve. Someone may watch this new set of movies, and when you talk about the old set of movies, will be like, you're old, you don't know what you're talking about. The mythos is different. Shut up. That's not Ghostface. That's how this 5 and 6 are becoming. Like, they really are creating a line in the sand. And it doesn't
mean 1 and 2
that,
of a new trilogy or a new whatever.
And it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that you can't love those originals, but it is putting a line in the sand, and that's the coolest thing that could happen. It's like if a new Nightmare on Elm Street comes out, I want it to be like paying homage, but I also want it to like make some dope choices that I may not have seen before. And it also feels like that's what Wes Craven would have wanted. I know it sounds weird to like reference a man that's not here anymore, but it really felt like Wes would like this more than he liked some of the other versions.
Well, I totally see the 5 and 6 being versions of something Wes Craven would have tried. And I think moving away from the old, like, we all know Sydney kind of felt extra in 5 anyway. Sydney and Gale felt like they were on a slightly extra trajectory in that movie. At least they did to me. So the fact that Sydney is not in this movie and that we still get Gale, that fits the sort of franchise model of how many characters you bring back in one movie. But I don't know. I mean, I think that I'll just go back to my comment about the consistency. I think that it still is a fun series to watch because, and again, Steve, that feeling of being unmoored and not quite knowing how this is going to link up with the characters we know, and it's New York and just the setting, everything about it that feels different. Like, it really does. I'm glad that you felt the same way about that opening stretch, Ronald, because to me that really was. Like, I was sitting there kind of giddy almost because I was watching a movie that I really didn't know what to expect from it. And then as it became a little bit more and more a Scream movie, and then a little bit more and more a kind of modern, Scream movie, as according to the model set up by the fifth one. I was like, okay, this is having some of those same issues, but that means it still had some of the same benefits. That it's really only in the very last act that it kind of, the set piece kind of goes away and it becomes this sort of the elaborate Scooby-Doo reveal of what's going on, and then all the aftermath of that. And then there's one cliche that it pulls 4 times. And once you've seen it, Steve, I'll reveal what cliche that is, but you'll probably know when you see it. But there's one thing that you might say, I'm annoyed when horror movies do this. This movie does it 4 times.
Yeah. Okay. This is the last thing. This isn't spoilery. Let me talk about some standout characters.
You say this is a spoiler?
No, this is not a spoiler.
Not a spoiler.
I want to talk about some standout. Jenna Ortega and Melissa Barrera. Yeah. They've kind of moved into this role, man. Like, they didn't quite feel welcome the last one. They felt like they were kind of on the outside. They're doing something special. Mason Gooding, Cuba Gooding's son, is incredible. He's such a lovable kid in this fucking movie. In the
you know who stole the movie for me, or at least we'll say their moment stole the movie for me, is Tony Revolori.
Yeah. How did this happen?
He's so good. I mean, he pops up whenever he pops up, he usually brings something to it. But in this movie, he's such an interesting face to see. The way that we meet him, I thought he was an interesting new character for this series.
For sure. It's special, man.
And Josh Segarra is continuing his string of playing likable, kind of semi-douchey bro, but likable guys. Like, it's almost the joke of him when he shows up is that you think you're not going to like him, and then you do.
Yeah. Because he has a dicey face. He has like a dicey, he's on the poster. You see him kind of in the trailer. You're like, man, this guy is dicey. He just brings a dicey energy to the screen that I love. So yeah, it was just a fun movie, man. Steve, can't wait for you to see it.
Yeah, I'm going Saturday.
Cool.
There's really not another series that does this. Scream is kind of on its own, right? As far as being kind of a thriller, kind of a slasher. It's like a really mean-spirited, usually. Like, there's something kind of mean-spirited about. There's so many characters saying mean things to each other and about each other, and just awful things happening, and like mercilessly setting you up to like a character or find them flawed in an interesting way, and then see them get killed. So I think that's. You just don't see movies that are made this well that do that often. That's why I'm still on board, even with these last 2 entries that haven't been my favorite, haven't been my Scream exactly. But I still am a fan of this series and kind of what it does. And I think that's what, sometimes with a horror series and you're a fan of it, that's kind of what it is you're coming back for something that it provides, some little thing. And there's still something creepy about that setup, the phone call, the voice on the phone. There's still something. Like, the way that someone can seem vulnerable when they hear that voice on the phone, even if they're in a crowded room, watching them in the movie, it really does something. So
the difference in pitch, like when it goes from like regular to like, you've been doing all this, when he starts to get like that, I'm like, oh God.
When he tips his hand that he's nasty, right?
Yeah,
he's pretending to be nice, and then he tips his hand that he's nasty, right? Like,
so I start to get fucking worried.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, cool. What else have we seen?
I wanted to say, we talked a lot earlier about things coming out on video on demand, and I mentioned, how like I'm guessing Cocaine Bear will be out in a week or so. But a movie the movie that I really wanted to see in the past like month or two was Missing, and that finally came out on VOD on Tuesday. Yeah, and we had Anish Giganti on the podcast, friend of the pod.
Yeah,
special.
He and Sev and Natalie, I think they've just they're producers of this. They have story credits. But
that appearance with us was so special. I haven't seen him mention it at all in any subsequent interviews, So it's like, that something that he's holding close to his heart, right?
No doubt.
Because he doesn't.
He's a great follow too. So I'm waiting for it to drop in one of his tweets here one day. But
one of these days, whatever happened to those nice boys from Baltimore?
Yeah. But yeah, there's 2 new co-directors on this one. Storm Reed, Nia Long. are the real stars of this. Well, I mean, Storm is the star of the movie. Nia Long is in it as well. She's great. Love her. Um, but yeah, it came out finally on video on demand this week. So if you saw Searching and liked that movie, these kind of screen time, these kind of modern thrillers, mystery thrillers that have come around. That Searching, I think, was like maybe one of the more successful ones, and now Missing is a second in a series I'll say I hope they keep making these movies. I hope they keep finding creative, inventive ways to, adapt them to the ever-changing view of technology that we use, for better
Steve,
or for
what do you think
worse.
the name of the next one should be? I have a suggestion. Poking Around.
Poking around. I think poking parentheses around. You got to have it end on the ing. So searching, missing, finding, looking.
Yeah.
Ghosting.
Sorry, something.
Ghosting.
Ooh, ghosting.
Yeah, that's good too. But yeah, I thought it was great, honestly. Like, I love Searching, and I was like, I don't know, like, can they really kind of do the same thing? Um, again, even so quickly. It's only been a couple years since Searching came out, but yeah, I think these movies are great. Honestly, I love them.
I would kind of say, of course they could, because there's nothing about that format that means it has to be tied to that one story. I do think what they showed was it's a good model for a kind of investigative approach, because it models the way you. I mean, we said it at the time. It's like it models, whether you think it's a gimmick or not. It's an interesting gimmick. It's like almost like a video game or an interactive element of like making you feel like you're immersed. You're seeing what you would see if you were doing the same thing the character's doing. At least that's the way it was in Searching. I don't know if Missing takes the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the propulsive nature of it, is like, how are they going to continue telling the story where logically we'd be looking at a screen,
right?
Or some sort of monitor or screen or video element that's using some form of today's technology, especially in this one, in Searching, John Cho kind of looking for his daughter, and it's like the parent using technology, not so adept at using it, not so versed in using it, where this one's a bit different, where it's the daughter trying to find the mother. So Storm's character is way more, stealth in the way that she uses technology. Her and her friend that is in the, kind of helps her at times. So it's an interesting way to flip that in terms of just the expertise and the use case that a teenager versus an adult in today's day and age would know how to use certain apps, or know how to do things like, like quickly reset passwords, and use Google locations tracking, like to do all that on their own without needing to ask someone to do it. So I think that's what maybe differentiates this the most, is just simply that, it is a bit of a mystery, it's a bit of a thriller, but it is interesting to see kind of the drive behind this being, a teenager who knows how to use technology instead. And is using all variations of it, and it's cool because, like, even I'm talking about the different ways that they kind of show the screens, and like, why would we be seeing a screen, and like we get some sort of variety of things, like Ring doorbells come into play. Backup cameras on vehicles are used as the screen, to see what's happening. And honestly, just a teenager's constant motivation to capture themselves on a camera, in some way. It's just enough of a reason for us to be seeing what's happening to her, or what she's doing if she maybe steps away from her computer or things like that. But yeah, I don't know. I thought there's some really fun kind of twists and turns in the story, some reveals that I think a lot of people that like movies like this will enjoy. It's a quick run. It's like hour 30, hour 40. It doesn't overstay. And yeah, man, like, I just think it's so creative how they do these movies, like watching some behind the scenes stuff. We always talk about that on the podcast, like how interested we are into how they make this stuff work. And I think the filmmaking, creating apps, making up apps and creating websites and creating app interfaces to look like legitimate things that are really just made up for the movie to serve a purpose in the story. It's so cool, because they all feel like they really probably do exist in this world that we live in reality, or they will soon. You know what I mean?
It's the very thing too that feels like you would fuck the whole thing up if it didn't feel real. it would seem cheesy as hell if it didn't feel real. So the fact that they can make it feel like, even not just the fact that you're saying it's like it follows the way you actually do dig around on a computer or dig around on social media or dig around on the internet, but like it also looks true to that, which is something we all know extremely well. You know what I mean? Like we're all extremely acquainted with what it looks like when you scroll through a bunch of stuff or when you click into a folder. So no, it is a very interesting thing. I guess that my favorite of those movies, not to say that it's by this team, but the Host is still my favorite. Like,
it's great
of those experiments of like this movie takes the shape of a video call, conference calls, different formula, but it's a similar idea of like just using the screen in front of you, so that this horror movie actually works best. If you actually were in a dark room watching it on a laptop, it might be the scariest way to watch it,
right,
the most immersive way.
But yeah, this definite recommend for me. I think it may. I think it's still actually. I think it's still actually playing in theaters, because I almost got to go see it last week or the week before I left vacation, but it didn't pan out. But yeah, this is one that's on VOD as of when you're listening to this. This past Tuesday it came out, but yeah, Missing is available. Highly recommend that. And if you had never watched Searching, I'd go back and check that out too.
Cool.
A lot of fun Easter eggs also in the movie if you're a fan of Searching, that kind of sort of tie these movies together too. So, yeah, Missing was great. What else have you guys seen? Otherwise,
yeah, I don't really want to add too much to this episode, but I will say that I've watched the first episode of season 2 of Perry Mason, and on HBO, and it's like the things that worked about the first year. It's one of those shows that's going to have a new storyline, more or less. Like there's some hangover from the last season, but it's like, can they establish a new group of characters and a new status quo for the character? And I think in this case there's a little bit of rehab going on, where the first season was well regarded, but it didn't take the world by storm, and so there's some idea that they might be able to make a hookier show, I think, out of this property, so to speak. But the cast is still great. I know the last time I probably overused the phrase production value every time I talked about this show, but it really is like one of those HBO shows of just beautiful set decoration and beautiful costuming, and everything about it is really interestingly done. And I do think by the end of the first episode, you're curious about the sort of human story that's being told, and also there's a sort of epic placing it in LA history kind of thing that's happening that reminds me of like the way Chinatown has like a large backdrop of like big forces moving, and controlling the world, as well as the murder mystery that you're kind of foregrounded. So yeah, I thought it was a pretty good first episode. And aside from that, I can't wait. Next week we'll get a chance to talk about Lucky Hank finally. But I think right now this episode actually comes out the day before the embargo is up on Lucky Hank. But I look forward to getting to chat about that, because I've watched the first two, and I think there's definitely some things to say about it.
cool. Ronald, anything else you want to throw in there?
Police Story 3, Jackie Chan, Michelle Yeoh. That's all I'm gonna say. Look it up. Really cool action film. Yeah, man. Michelle Yeoh is in her moment right now, but she's been in her moment for 30, 40 years. Yeah. So
she's in her mainstream American moment right now. She's not. She's had career moments 100%. Before.
I can give you like 10 movies that she was incredible in that rival Everything Everywhere All at Once. But I think that the companies that have access to her stuff are starting to put her. They're like, well, we're sitting on this. Let's put this out. So it's really cool to see the stuff that's coming out. But that's one of them. Police Story.
Well, the reason that's an interesting one too is that I love, if you catch her in an interview, she'll talk shit about Jackie Chan. she does like a really friendly, nice version of talking shit about how he was kind of sexist about certain things with her, but then she kind of proved him wrong, that she could go toe to toe with him.
Yeah, man, what a weird. And then kind of like turning down Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Mm-hmm.
What a weird. What a weird.
But I'm so glad he did. I'm so glad that happened.
A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So good. So glad. She like, I think about that movie at least once a week. It's like that kind of movie. So yeah. Cool. That's all for me.
I think that's an episode.
As a quick reminder, if you're listening to this podcast before Sunday, the 12th, it is Oscar Sunday this weekend. So tune in and see if Michelle wins, if the film wins, and we'll talk probably next week, kind of recap it a little bit, or our feelings about just the program, the broadcast itself, and the winners, and see how we kind of feel about how it all ends up. But yeah, that airs this Sunday evening. Movieschmovie.com is the website. You can hit it up there to check past episodes, to jump into uh, whatever podcast platform you listen to us on, and subscribe. Make sure you do subscribe, and if you do, hit a review or a rating or anything like that you can add to the podcast on that platform, just to kind of help people find us, hopefully. Also, the youtube.com/Schmovie podcast. Am I right, Ronald? Or movie Schmovie podcast? I always get
Movie
it wrong.
Schmovie podcast.
Movie Schmovie podcast. If you want the video element, that's there for you as well. And again, as I said earlier, Ronald and John look great in this episode, so this might be a good one to watch if you want to do it.
Check it out.
Steve's got some amazing lifts on his hair. But really, this is one of our best looking episodes we've ever done.
It's a good one. Yeah, I'm happy with it, actually. Maybe I'll leave it alone. But yeah, we'll be back next week. Ronald, Operation Fortune. We'll find it. We'll watch it. We'll talk about it. Required viewing.
Yeah,
It'll happen. And maybe I'll have seen Scream, and we can kind of do a little post-mortem on that and actually talk a little more about it.
Yeah, do it like a spoiler section.
Yeah, cool. All right, guys. Good seeing you both. And as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.